Hello again. In this segment of our series we will discuss that part of the boat which is normally underwater and hidden from your view. We will show you what you need to do when your boat is hauled out and on the hard. This includes inspecting everything that is underwater, such as your propellers, shafts, cutlass bearings, rudders, and the general bottom of your boat. Topics we will cover include osmosis repairs, application of anti-fouling paint, replacement of propellers, inspection and replacement of cutlass bearings, replacement of zincs, replacement of through hulls, and the installation of a new transducer. Now let's go down to the yard and have a look. So we continue to look along the hull, looking for the pattern of looking for blisters, looking for any damage along it. And one of the things to look carefully along is at the keel hull joint. This boat appears to have a leg keel, and there has been some repairs down here. Now, looking at this, it appears that the repair was never sanded afterwards, so bottom paint would adhere to it. That's something we will fix when we are repainting this boat. The joint here feels good, there's no sign of cracking. That probably indicates that the bottom bolts are okay. Finally, coming back to the bow of the boat, we notice that there's fairly severe sections of bottom paint missing. Our recommendation here would be to sand down with 80 grit, apply a tight coat primer such as Pettis 6627, and then overcoat it with 2 coats of anti-fouling paint. But you need a tight coat primer here to make your bottom paint adhere to the surface. To summarise, the bottom of this boat is not in bad condition. We need to replace this through hull that we found to be defective. We need to examine around the rudder skeg area to understand that repair which was previously done. We need to do some work around the bottom of the keel to sand the repair surfaces so that paint will adhere. To remove oxidization and marine growth build-up, followed by sanding of all the bottom paint to remove the dead and flaking paint and to improve adhesion of the new anti-fouling paint. Next, let's have a look at the rudder and the skeg. Here we can see some repairs have been done on the skeg at some stage, and we examine the area carefully to see that whatever caused the repair is not reoccurring. Looking at the skeg, we see there's an area of repair down here. We need to examine that more carefully by sanding away to see what exactly was repaired. It appears that there were several new pieces of fiberglass cloth epoxied into place around this skeg. So one of the tasks we will probably do is to sand down this and try and understand what repair was done here. There is some evidence of minor cracking and fissuring along here, as shown here on it. So everything is tight and smooth. After your boat has been hauled out and pressure washed, you need to allow the bottom to dry. Once the bottom is dried, there are a number of things you need to check. First thing is what type of anti-fouling paint is applied and what's the condition of the anti-fouling paint. Typically, to determine the anti-fouling paint, run your hand lightly across the surface. If no paint comes off in your hands, it is typically a hard paint. If your hand is covered with paint, same color as the bottom, it is normally regarded as being a soft or a blade of paint. The next thing you want to do is determine the condition of the paint. A hard paint will build up on the surface over a number of years. Once it's built up over a certain thickness, it starts cratering and needs to be fully removed. And a blade of paint does not build up, but slowly removes itself as the boat goes through the water. In this case, the paint is hard paint. We can see the water line here, and there's about 4.5 inches above the water line all around. We do not have to raise the water line for this boat. It's pretty good at the moment. As a boat gets older, typically the water line rises. Some water is absorbed into the hull, and the owner puts more and more equipment or possessions aboard the boat. Sometimes we're forced to raise the water line above the boot stripe and install a new boot stripe. The bottom of paint on this boat appears to be about 3 years old. It is hard paint and probably come to end of life. First thing we need to do is check the adhesion of the paint onto the substrate, i.e. the fiberglass hull. Do this by simply trying to remove some of it. In this case, the adhesion seems to be pretty good. And the treatment for this boat would be to lightly sand the bottom with 40 grit paper. Hang on. Be careful when you're sanding around the water line. Typically you apply a 1-inch masking tape along there to protect the edge from the sander. Obviously you cannot sand underneath the stand. You leave that to last. When you've painted this section of the boat and the paint is dried, you move the stand over to here. To move the stand, you need a spare stand. In other words, you have to have one more stand. You place the next stand here first, then you remove this stand. Do not just simply remove this stand and hope the boat will stay standing. It may or may not. The safe way is to bring another stand to it and then swap it over. We should check each through hull for mud doppers or other obstructions. Here's a mud dopper that was located in that through hull. While it may not cause damage today, it may cause more material to block up and completely block up the through hull in the near future. Looking at the hull side and bottom paint, we can see that there was extensive rubbing against, probably pilings or something in the last few years on this boat. We need to check this for damage. There are some minor scrapes and scratches in here which can be covered with bottom paint, but most of these scratches up here cannot be redone easily. It involves repainting the boat. Continuing to check the port side of the sailboat, we check, again, look for all through hulls, check them for wastage. Can inspect this side of the keel for cracking or any signs of damage, which we don't find any. Continue up along, looking for patrons. This through hull has been replaced at some stage. That fuel vent is pretty old and should be replaced simply because it's wasted. We found a defective through hull on this boat. As you can see, it's wasted away, considerable wastage on it. This needs to be replaced as soon as possible. It's a bronze through hull. Why it has failed, we need to examine closely so that it does not repeat itself in the future.
Action.
Continue along our inspection of the port side of the underside of the boat. We notice this through hull is damaged and wasted away. The mode of failure is undetermined at this stage, and we need to examine it more carefully to see what is going on. But it appears to be wasted away. This needs to be urgently replaced. Come down a bit, okay?
Action.
Continue our inspection of the port side of the underside of the boat. We notice this through hull is pretty much wasted away. It's hard to know what the mechanics of failure here is. It could have been erosion or corrosion. But if this is not replaced in the near future, or in fact immediately, there's a real possibility of this through hull